Well, hello everyone and welcome. Today we are going to be discussing some common financial management blips. And joining me is John Spencer, president of John Spencer and Associates Inc. He's a financial or economic management, farm management expert, and their company does everything from economic planned or applied economics all the way through to strategic planning and development and everything in between. So welcome, Mr. Spencer. And I should note, he is also my dad. And that's pretty
Thank you.
cool. So anyway, today we're going to take a look at some of the common financial management things that happen in different farms. So um, you have decades of experience. So what are some of the most common financial management mistakes that producers make in your experience, that based on what you've seen in different types of operations or whatever?
Well, I think the key thing to remember is that it doesn't really matter what type of enterprise you're talking about, whether you're talking about horticulture or you're talking about raising chinchillas. The mistakes are the same. I tried to make these not necessarily in order of significance because they all really matter. And the first big mistake people do is that they are not maintaining the right kind of records, and whatever they are keeping, they're not keeping them for the right reason. Everybody wants to minimize tax. It's a mantra in agriculture. You don't want to give anything to the tax man. That is the last person you should be worrying about. The type of records you should be keeping are those that will help you make good decisions on your operation. So we're talking production records. Well, if you're and I think every agriculture enterprise has to worry about disease. What is your herd health, if you will, for your horticulture barns? You know, are your cucumbers, do they have wet noses? Or whatever it might happen to be. You've got to know that kind of thing. You've got to look for trend analysis. If you can't look at your own information over a period of time, you're limiting how effective you can be at making good decisions. So that's the very first thing, is keep really, really good records. And everybody wants to keep at the end of the year when it's time to do the tax thing. Well, if you're keeping your records on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, you're doing a review of the stuff you entered that month, now you're in a position to see something starting to build. And you're not going to get bitten when that thing arrives, because you've already dealt with it. The second big mistake is that you lie to yourself. You know, maybe you're feeling you're up against it and your margins are down, or you're noticing your bank account's empty, your operating line is getting a little bit stretched. And you start to figure that, well, if I could just do X, Y, or Z, you know, if I get another 4 or 5% of my normal yield, that'll make the problem go away. Or if I can just grind my purchaser for another 5 or 6% on my price, or whatever it might be. Now, those might be legitimate things to work towards, but at the same time, your own history is going to give you very good data as to how likely is that to happen. So if you're going to lie to somebody, don't let it be yourself. And the other person you should not lie to, this is my third point, is don't lie to the bank. Those are the people that keep you in business. You know, everybody has to operate with borrowed money. I don't know anybody who operates out of their own wallet in today's agricultural environment, especially in something as intensive as the horticultural industries. You've got to have a banker who's on your side, and if you don't tell him the truth, he will find out, and you will be dealing somewhere else if you can find someone who will take you on. In my practice, for the last, well, especially since COVID hit, but probably starting back about September of 2019, the lending environment changed, everything tightened. And so to move from one creditor to another is really difficult. So protect the relationship you've got. My fourth point would be, as far as a big mistake would be, you get so busy doing the work that you don't take time to see if you're doing the right things. So it's like clearing the wrong piece of bush. You know, you've got to be focusing on what really needs to get done. And it's so easy in this industry. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about cows or turnips. you can get so caught up in getting things done, you can ignore the other things that are screaming at you because you're busy doing. And although that is satisfying in the short term, it is not success based in the long term. So that would be another thing. The fifth point would be that you may be too aggressive for current market conditions or even the market trend. If you are pounding money into projects that are potentially profit generating, but you have not assessed those very carefully, something can go sideways, like a pandemic, which is awfully hard to predict. But there could be something else that happened, a rapid adjustment in dollar values or whatever. And you may have, whether it's the cost component you've got to deal with, or it's the money you can make selling the product at the end, you may find yourself unpleasantly surprised. So it goes back to point 2. Don't be lying to yourself that there's going to be something, some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow somewhere. Trust that, again, careful growth is likely more sustainable growth than some massive inflow of energy or money to profit grab. Well, it's great if it works. Silicon Valley is a good example of where people did that, where they punched in billions of dollars to chase money that might be there, and ultimately a lot of that money was lost because of that. Agriculture is not typically that way, but there are some people who treat it that way. So especially in something as capital intensive as horticulture, you've got to make sure you've done your work first. My last point would be that they don't involve their lender in their decision making. I'll give you an example. It is not horticulture very quickly. I had a producer who was raising eggs, and she had a whole battery of cages drop into the manure tank or pit beneath. The birds literally drowned in poo. It was nasty. Well, she got grumpy about this for some reason, and it is disgusting at every level. But she went out and she arranged to build an entire new building without talking to the bank. And she set up for, it was way over $2 million worth of supplier credit to put up this facility, had the hole excavated and the concrete poured and the building going up before she ever talked to the bank. And that was a very poor decision because the overall operation was not stable enough to absorb that kind of a hit without significant lending support. And ultimately it cost her the farm because of bad communication. Is it unfortunate that the cages fell in? Absolutely. Did it mean there had to be something major done? Absolutely. All you had to do was make sure your lender was on site. They got grumpy as much as the place was, whether it was viable or not. They got grumpy that people were making decisions like that. So ramp it back to a greenhouse or something else of that type, a market garden. If you're planning on doing something that involves significant dollars or a significant change to your structure, whether it's infrastructure or business structure, your financing structure, talk to the bank first. So there's my 6 points.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks. Those are good points. And yeah, I mean, what about, just to sort of follow up on one of those, keeping good records, what if you're new? How do you deal with that? If you don't have a history, do you just start and then go as you go, or kind of learn as you go along, or what do you recommend for someone who doesn't have that operational history?
That's a wonderful question. I think that the reality is that, everybody starts somewhere. Maybe you grew up in the biz and you've got access to your family's historical information. That would be ideal. But if you are a completely new entrant where you have no history to draw on, the best that you can do is to go and find as much good science as you can and what's been done by other people. Some industries are far more proprietary, shall we say, about their production information. There's lots of consequences for letting people know what you're doing. And so they're not really that keen on whipping open their books and saying, well, here's my life, financially speaking. Having said that, there is usually good information on an enterprise by doing data searches, talking to consultants like yourself and saying, all right, what is it likely what's likely to happen in my barns or in my plots? So I always refer to agriculture, and it doesn't matter which part it is, as a swag. And forgive my dance into crudity here, but that means scientific wild ass guess. And the best part about it, because it's always a guess until you're at the end of the production period and you've seen what you got for what you grew. Where you make it a good swag is by injecting as much science as you can at the start. And year by year, your data pool shifts from being book data to being personal data. You'll also find that your personal stuff at the start, unless you're some miracle worker, you're going to mess up. You're going to have, if you anticipated getting, I don't even know what figure to use, X for your yield on sweet corn or on potatoes or rutabagas or whatever it might happen to be, you're going to discover something went wrong and you didn't get what you thought you would through your whole production. Maybe one piece of dirt does poor or whatever. So get the data that you can online, find a consultant who's got experience. When there were government-sponsored extension programs, that information was more likely to be available. The reality for all of, the world is that governments are stopping those services, and so consultants have become more important. And I'm not, blowing our horn as consultants, but the reality is that as soon as the customer discovers that the consultant's got something to say that makes money and saves time or whatever, they're less reluctant to go back and trust that person for more information. So that's the first thing. Get the data from where you can. And then and let your lender know that you're using book because you have no personal experience.
Well, and I mean, they should, if you've been having that conversation as you go in to meet them, they'll know that it's not your own personal data. It's something that it's at that point still theoretical. But
exactly.
I mean, the good thing about using, in my experience anyways, is of using sort of book data is that it's often very conservative. So it's not generally overly optimistic and a little bit of foo-foo dust and fairy tales. So at least there's a dose of sort of hard reality maybe in there. I mean, it's still theoretical, of course. But
yeah, one of the tools that crop producers in Saskatchewan use, it's called the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture Crop Planning Guide. It will go by soil zone and by crop through the entire province. And you can say this, well, over time, I used to think it was pretty wonderful, and it is as a first position. Then I discovered that even my best producers were probably 25% lower on their input costs and probably 5 to 10% higher in yield than the government was projecting, and that's fine. So again, it is a base. There's one other thing that you can do if you are getting into this, if you can find it, and that is a mentor. Find someone who can grandfather you into the industry, all their experience and their wisdom. If you can establish a relationship with someone like that, your life is so much easier, and your path into the industry is so much smoother. And it's interesting. A lot of people who are senior, as far as experience levels, they kind of take it as it's flattering that someone would come to them and say that, I want to sit at your feet and learn things, O wise men on the mountain. They really like the fact that you said you are the dean of the industry and I think you could teach me things. So it may work. It may not always. There are people who are not willing to share, and that's fine.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I agree. I mean, and I think in my experience in the industry I've worked in, that there are lots of people who are willing to open the books, at least to a certain degree, who are willing to sit down and talk through an idea with a new person. But yeah, so all good points to think about avoiding in terms of or mistakes that potentially could come back and bite you. Thanks very much, Mr. Spencer. I really appreciate what you've given today.
Thank you. Great for the opportunity.